You can tell in that book that I'm very interested in relationships between women, and also how women can, certainly in this book, women have more space and more permission to build good relationships with each other. The younger men are so paralyzed by these two destructive images of masculinity in front of them. And the professor is actually not much better than Bill. His techniques for dominating are more refined, but he uses his knowledge and his social status as forms of power and violence, where Bill doesn't have access to those forms of knowledge and status. And the young men are really trapped there because it's so hard, and particularly when the book's set in the 90s, it was hard for a young man faced with an older man suggesting that you're not a real man if you don't do this thing, or you're being feminine, or you're not living up to masculinity. That's terribly controlling and makes it much harder for men to develop warm friendships and to think about feelings and to support each other than it can be for women who are not constantly being told that any sign of emotion means that they're not really women at all, or that they shouldn't be behaving that way. So I'm very aware of the damage of the patriarchy to young men as well. And Sylvie is absolutely in that point where, I mean, she actually wants to become more like her father than her mother. And I think that's another very interesting thing about female adolescence. I think a lot of us at sort of 15 to 20-ish imagine that we will be the first generation to escape the constraints that determine our mothers' lives. And certainly I and my friends, I think, thought that somehow we would never encounter the same problems that our mothers had encountered, that we just weren't going to bother with that, or that we wouldn't have to deal with the problems they'd had to deal with. And as you get older, you discover that things haven't changed that much, and you can't end up on the right side of the patriarchy. Almost nobody ends up on the right side of the patriarchy, including men. But there's that moment in late adolescence when you think it might be different for you, and that's quite exciting. Often the ways people write violence against women end up being voyeuristic and titillating, even if they're not supposed to be. And if you're going to write violence against women, you have to do it in a way that leaves no space for the reader to be watching or listening. The reader has to be in the character's head, behind the character's eyes, between the character's ears. You can't open up any space. You can't let them step back even one little step to watch or listen to what's happening. So that felt crucial to me in writing both of the violent scenes.